So today's lesson is about persevere. You know, Steve's sense of humor. When I sent out the order of worship to some of the individuals here who assist in putting on and helping us in our worship services, Steve said, "Are you getting us ready for the next wave? Because now we have the Omicron variant." I'm not going to get into the politics of all that, and so perhaps the idea of persevering is fitting for that topic. But if you're anything like me, it's just getting to a level of exhaustion with COVID and all the requirements associated with it. And I just wanted to give you a word of encouragement this morning and to encourage you to continue to persevere. Albert Einstein once remarked that he wasn't so much that he was a smart guy, he just stuck with problems longer than most. And maybe that's what it means to persevere. But I think, as you'll see from the word today, that perseverance is also very biblical. And the message and the text of the message is taken from the New Testament book of Matthew, chapter 28, verses 2 through 7. At that time, there was a strong earthquake. An angel of the Lord came down from heaven, went to the tomb, and rolled the stone away from the entrance. Then he sat on the stone. He was shining as bright as lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The soldiers guarding the tomb shook with fear because of the angel, and they all became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Don't be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who has been crucified, but he is not here. He has risen from the dead as he said he would. Come and see the place where his body was. And go quickly and tell his followers, Jesus has risen from the dead. He is going into Galilee ahead of you, and you will see him there." Then the angel said, "Now I have told you." I don't know if you're like me, but have you ever read a story that you think you know, and then read it again and see something that you've never seen before? It's like reading about the same event, let's say 100 times. And then on that 101st time, you see something striking, something so new that it makes you wonder if you were sleeping through the other 100 times that you were reading. Maybe it's because we started in the middle of the story instead of maybe at the beginning. Or perhaps it's because someone else has read it aloud to us and pauses in a location that we would never think to pause. And then all of a sudden, it's like, pow, kind of like this slide. It just hits you. You grab the book, you look at it, you're convinced that someone copied or read something wrong, but then you read it, and it's like, well, what do you know? I had never seen that before. Well, that happened to me. I've read the resurrection story at least a half century of Easters and probably hundreds of times in between. I've taught the Easter story. I've meditated on the Easter story. I've underlined the Easter story. But what I saw this time, I honestly had not seen before. But before I tell you what I discovered, let's recount the story just a little bit to help set the stage. So it's early dawn on Sunday morning, and the sky is dark. Those, in fact, are John's words. John writes in John chapter 10, or John chapter 20, verse 1, that, quote, "It was still dark." It's a dark Sunday morning. It had been dark since Friday. Dark with Peter's denial. Dark with the disciples' betrayal, dark with Pilate's cowardice, dark with Christ's anguish, particularly dark because of Satan's glee. The only ember of light was the small band of women standing at a distance from the cross, watching. And you can read about that in Matthew chapter 27, verse 55. And among them were two women, both of whom their names were Mary. One, the mother of James and Joseph, and the other is Mary Magdalene. And we wonder why they're there. Well, they're there perhaps to call his name, to be the final voices that maybe Jesus hears before he dies, to prepare his body for a burial. They're there to clean the blood from his beard. They're there to wipe the crimson from his legs. They're there to potentially close his eyes, to touch his face. That's why they're there. They are the last to leave Calvary, and they are first to arrive at a grave. So early on that Sunday morning, they leave their pallets, they walk out into the tree-shadowed path, and theirs is really a very somber task, because the morning promises only one thing for them: an encounter with a corpse. You know, remember, Mary and Mary don't know that this is the first Easter morning. They're not hoping that the tomb will be vacant. They aren't discussing what their response will be when they see Jesus. They have absolutely no idea whatsoever that the grave was empty. Oh, there was a time when they dared to dream those kind of dreams, but not now. It's too late for that incredible feat. The feet that had walked on water they watched had been pierced on a cross. The hands that healed the lepers and gave sight to the blind had been stilled, being nailed to a cross. Their noblest admirations had been spiked into Friday's cross. Mary and Mary have come to place warm oils on a cold body and bid farewell to the one man who had given them reason to hope. But it isn't hope that leads the women up that mountain to the tomb. It's duty. It's simple, it's pure, naked devotion. They expect nothing in return. I mean, what could Jesus possibly give them now? What could a dead man offer them? The two women are not climbing the mountain to the grave to receive. They're going to a tomb to give. That's the story. And there's no motivation more noble than that. And there are times, I think, when we collectively are called to love and expecting nothing in return. Times when we're called to give money to people who will never say thank you, or to give or forgive those who won't forgive us, or to come early and stay late when no one else notices, much less even cares. Service prompted by duty. That's the call of discipleship. Mary and Mary knew a task had to be done. Jesus' body had to be prepared for burial. Peter didn't offer to do it. Andrew certainly didn't volunteer. The forgiven adulteress or the healed lepers or the recently sighted, they're nowhere to be seen. So the two Marys decide to do that. I've wondered sometimes if maybe halfway to the tomb, maybe they'd have sat down and even reconsidered what they were thinking about doing. I mean, what if they had looked at each other and shrugged, what's the use? And what if they had given up? What if one of them had thrown up their arms in frustration and said, you know what? I'm tired of being the only one around here who seems to care. Let Andrew do something for a change. Or let Nathaniel show a little leadership this time. Now, whether or not they were tempted to do that, I'm glad that they didn't quit. That would have been tragic, right? Because we know something that Mary and Mary did not. We know that the Father was watching. Mary and Mary thought that they were alone, but they weren't. They thought their journey would be unnoticed, but they were wrong. And they were wrong because God knew. He was watching them walk up the mountain. He was measuring their steps. He was smiling at their hearts and thrilled at their devotion. And he had a surprise waiting for them. At that time, there was a strong earthquake. An angel of the Lord came down from heaven, went to the tomb, rolled the stone away from the entrance. Then he sat on the stone. He was shining bright as lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The soldiers guarding the tomb shook with fear because of the angel, and they became like dead men. That's a portion of the text that we started with, Matthew chapter 28, verses 2 through 4. Now, I want you to read it with me again carefully. Let's go back. At that time, there was a strong earthquake. An angel of the Lord came down from heaven, went to the tomb, and rolled the stone away from the entrance. Then he sat on the stone. He was shining bright as lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The soldiers guarding the tomb shook with fear because of the angel, and they became like dead men. I want you to tell me this. Tell me, why did the angel move the stone?
So that Mary could look in.
Perfect. For whom did he roll that rock away? It wasn't for Jesus. But that's what I had always thought in reading the story, that the angel came and moved the rock away so Jesus could leave the tomb. I just assumed that the angel moved the stone so Jesus could come out. But think about that. Did the stone have to be moved in order for Jesus to exit? Did God have to have some help? Was the death conqueror so weak that he couldn't push the rock away himself? No, I don't think so. Because the text gives the impression that Jesus was already out of the tomb when the rock was rolled away. He's not here the angel said. Nowhere in the Gospels does it say that the angel moved the stone for Jesus. So if that's true, for whom then was the stone moved? Listen to what the angel says in verse 6. Come, come, and see the place where his body was. The stone was moved not for Jesus, but for Mary and Mary. Not so Jesus could come out, but so the women could see in. And I'm assuming at that moment, Mary looks at Mary, and Mary is grinning, that same grin she had when the bread and the fish just kept coming out of the basket. And now the old passions begin to flare, and suddenly it's all right to dream again. Go quickly and tell his followers, Jesus has risen from the dead. He is going into Galilee ahead of you, and you will see him there. And Mary did not have to be told twice. They turn and they start running to Jerusalem because now the darkness is gone. The sun is up. The Son of God is out. But the sun isn't finished because there's still one surprise that awaits Mary and Mary. Verses 9 and 10. Suddenly, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." The women came up to him, took hold of his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid. Go and tell my followers to go on to Galilee, and they will see me there." You see, church, the God of surprises strikes again. It's as if he said, I just can't wait any longer. They came this far to see me. I think I'll just drop in and say, "What's up?" And God does that for the faithful. Because just when the womb was too old for babies, Sarai got pregnant. Just when the failure was too great for grace, David was pardoned. And just when the road was too dark for Mary and Mary, the angel glowed, the Savior showed, and the two women would never, ever be the same again. And I think the lesson here can be distilled into one word, and that word is persevere. Don't give up. Is the trail dark? Don't sit. Is that road seemingly too long? Don't stop. Is the night black? Don't quit. God is watching. And for all you and I know, right at this very moment, he may be telling the angel to move whatever that stone is in your life too. Maybe the check will be actually in the mail. That apology may be in the making. That contract may be on your desk. Or that healing may be just around the corner. So, church, persevere. Don't quit. Because if you do, you may just miss the answer to your prayers. God still sends angels, and he's still in the business of moving stones. Now, I realize that in the giving and the delivering of this message, this seems more like an Easter message, right? Something that we would do during Easter time. But Paul talked repeatedly that his singular task in life was to preach Christ crucified. And so despite the fact that we're in the Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays, I thought it was important to talk about Christ crucified and resurrected, because it has for us a lesson that I think is valuable for today, and that is to persevere. We are in extraordinary life's events, and it can be exhausting. And there have been many who have just simply quit, given up, folded the tent, and moved away. But church, this season in particular, your community, your family, your friends, and your acquaintances need some good news. And if you don't persevere in that message, they may never hear it. So as we start entering in now to the Christmas season, persevere. Don't quit. Don't give up. Because if you do, you may just miss that answered prayer.